My name is Ariel Second-Deranger, and I'll serve as the moderator for today's press panel. Just to give you an overall summary of what the study is and the study's goal, the overall goal of the phase 2 of this component of this long-term project, phase 1 being completed in September of 2012, which focused largely on the traditional food contaminants. This part, phase 2, characterized the impacts of upstream industrial activities associated with the Athabasca oil sands for wildlife, environmental, and especially the human health as it affects the ACFN and MCFN members in Fort Chipewyan. I'd like to start today's panel by introducing the head researcher, Dr. Stéphane McLachlan, to open with some remarks on the study and the findings of the study. So, Stéphane.
Okay, so thank you everyone for attending today. Just wanted to start off by saying a couple of things about myself. I'm trained as an ecologist, an environmental scientist, and have branched out to looking at environmental health. I'm employed at the University of Manitoba. I'm a full professor there, and I kind of work with about 15 to 20 grad students usually, and about 10 to 15 research assistants. So far, we've been working on a couple of major projects, multi-million-dollar projects, and this study, this 3-year study in Fort Chipewyan is one of those. It's important to recognize that this study, from beginning to end, was initiated and shaped by both Mikisew Cree and Athabasca and Chipewyan First Nations. It's also important to recognize that it's what I call a 3-track process, so that incorporates traditional knowledge and also environmental and health sciences, and importantly, it really allows the two of those streams to intermingle and to inform, feed one another. This holistic approach is really important because it better resonates the science with the traditional knowledge. So in terms of the findings, I'll start off, first of all, just briefly talking about the human health, and then I'll talk about the factors that lead to that. So again and again and again, and I'm sure you've heard the same thing, kind of elders and leaders have been telling us that there have been these sharp declines in human health that have been taking place over the last 50 years in Fort Chipewyan. Those illnesses range from neurological illnesses like depression and stress, respiratory illnesses like asthma and allergy, circulatory illnesses like coronaries, hypertension, reproductive illnesses like miscarriages, and gastrointestinal illnesses like ulcerative kidney disease, as well as diabetes and arthritis. Many of these changes characterize indigenous communities across the north, and so you see diabetes, for example, heart disease is characterizing many northern indigenous communities, but there's something unique that's happening in Fort Chipewyan. And so we're going to be focusing on that today. Especially when you do the interviews and when you do the analysis that we did around cancer rates. So what we did is what we call a body mapping exercise where we interviewed people from across the community, 113 people, and spoke to them about the changes in the illnesses that they've been seeing and asked them to record their medical history. This was done in an inclusive and safe environment, and what we've done is we focused our analysis on that. Notably, 21% of the participants in that study had suffered from cancer. What we then did is we did a kind of a more advanced statistical analysis where we compared the people who have suffered from cancer and the people who haven't, and looked to see what the drivers might be behind that, what the factors that might explain those differences might be. Importantly, we found 2 things. First of all, the consumption of traditional foods and the consumption specifically of locally caught fish are an important contributor to cancer occurrence. And secondly, employment in the oil sands also are an important contributor. And so what happens then is that both of those factors, as well as a number of other secondary factors, seem to be driving cancer occurrence in this community. It's important to also note that not only do you have this broad and that's very unique to Fort Chippewa decline in health, but you also have the healthcare services that are out there that are inadequate to take on that load. And so basically what you have is two sides of the same coin, the health coin, kind of reflecting and contributing to the problem. Now this study again was holistic in approach, and so not only did we focus on human health, but we also focused on environments and traditional food diets. And so in terms of the environment contaminants, what we did is we focused on two suites. We focused on heavy metals and we focused on polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, or PAHs. And what we found is that a number of the wildlife that we tested had high concentrations of those. But beyond that, what we found is that it was especially concentrated in the kidneys and the livers of these animals. What we also did when we looked at the diets is we found that people, because of something that's called a nutrient or a diet transition, are eating less traditional foods than they used to. And so when you factor that in, actually the situation is more hopeful than just the concentrations of those elements would indicate. So basically what we then did is we conducted kind of what we call a household questionnaire survey with 111 people in the community and got a better sense of, and quantified how much they're eating of what different kinds of species. And so what we found is that people are still eating a wide diversity of traditional foods, but they're much less so than in the past. And that's because they're scared of the whole contaminant crisis that's taking place out there. Importantly, when you factor in that the oil sands and other industry have a strong influence over the contamination loads in these communities, what we see is that industry is a major driver behind the transition that's taking place. As people shift from eating the traditional foods to eating the store-bought foods. So in conclusion, what we can see is that there's a perfect storm that's taking place here. You have industry-related contaminants being found in the traditional foods, so the mercury and the PAHs. People are eating those foods, which appears to make them, in some cases, sick, or they're switching over to store-bought foods, which also makes them sick. And finally, the third front, if you like, in terms of this perfect storm, is that the health services aren't adequate to address these declines in health. And so it's a situation that is alarming. It's also a situation that demands attention. And as a researcher, what I'm demanding from the government is that we further explore these declines and the reasons that underlie these declines with appropriate health research. Thank you.